Hi everyone, so welcome to my June wrap up. I only read 5 books, or well 5.5 books this month, so it's not going to be quite as long as last month's, and it's also proof that I don't get through 10 books every month. It, ebbs and flows. So part of the reason why I think I didn't read as many books this month, I was sort of distracted with other things, which always contributes, but also I think although I enjoyed the books that I've read, they took a bit more getting into. They didn't hook me as much as books I've read in previous months, so it took me longer to read them. I kind of wasn't, so eager to keep picking them up. But yeah, let's go through the books. So the first book is the Half book. This is a poetry book and it's called The Celery Forest by Catherine Graham. I tend to read poetry collections a bit slower than novels. Obviously, you digest poetry different than short stories and novels. So I'm about halfway through it and I'm really enjoying it, but I sort of like to savour poetry a bit more, so I kind of, delve in and out of it. So Catherine is a poet that she was over at an event in Coleraine, which is 20 minutes from where I live, quite recently, and I went to the event and I enjoyed her work and I thought I would get her latest collection. So I'll just read you a bit from the back. It says, like Wonderland or Oz, Neverland or Narnia, the Celery Forest is an extraordinary world filled with strange creatures and disorienting sights. But the doorway to the Celery Forest is not a rabbit hole or an old wardrobe. The doorway is an MRI. For poet and novelist Catherine Graham, this is the topsy-turvy world she found herself in after learning she had breast cancer. More than a survivor's tale, these poems are mapped through unknowable terrain, infused with awareness and forgetting, written by a poet with the visionary ability to distill our sense of wonder into something we can hold. So, as I say, I'm enjoying this collection, and Catherine actually studied in Northern Ireland, I think, for a while. She lived here for a while, so that's quite nice as well, that she's returned to sort of share her work with us, and that, she's sort of local as well, because she lived here a while. So yes, I'm still reading that one. So the next book I read was The Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Hogan. So this is actually our book of the month for the Giant's Causeway book club, which kicked off basically at the end of June. So we've just had our first meeting there last week, and this was the first book we picked. So The Keeper of Lost Things, I think it was a former Richard and Judy book club winner, and yeah, it was a really nice light read for the summer. I read it pretty quickly. Our book club gave it an average. By the time we averaged our scores, it only got 4.5 out of 10. So I think we just found that although it was a light, easy read, sort of enjoyable, it was a bit, I don't want to say schmaltzy, but everything kind of tied up very neatly, which I think a lot of the people in the group weren't so fussed on. There were two sort of love stories, or two stories running parallel to each other, and basically we thought there wasn't maybe enough, or there could have been more done with the lost things, which is in the title of the book. So basically this guy called Anthony Perdue collects things he finds in the street, so lost things. It could be a lost hair bobble, it could be a lost umbrella, it could be any sort of object, and then he stored them in his house. And basically, it's not too much of a spoiler to say that he passes away, but in his will he says he wants his assistant Laura to track down the owners of all these lost things that he's accumulated over the years, which is a pretty big job because he has a whole study full of them, drawers and drawers. So I think we kind of thought that the stories that we did find out, the stories behind some of the lost objects were interesting, and we were kind of hoping for more of that. So it is an interesting story. It is quite moving. It is fun. Dogs feature a lot in it if you like dogs, which our book club members also enjoyed. So I personally would recommend it. So if you want something light and easy to read, pick this one up. So the next book I read was Ladder of Years by Anne Tyler. This was one I picked up in the local co-op for 50p, another of my charity shop finds, yeah. Again, it just goes to show that a cover doesn't always denote the quality of the book, because I really don't like this cover, but I obviously have heard of Anne Tyler, and it sounded quite intriguing on the blurb, because it's basically about a 40-year-old woman called Cordelia Grinstead, who's on the beach one day with her family, and she just walks off the beach and she doesn't come back. So those sort of stories always interest me, and basically I know there's been books maybe which take a similar concept that have been published more recently. This was published back in the mid-90s, so she kind of maybe got there first. Now, this is one of the books that I say I did enjoy it, and it might have been my book of the month, but I'm going to pick another one, I think. But it took a while to kind of get me going, and I don't know whether that's because of the period it's set in, sort of 90s middle America, or I'm not quite sure, but it sort of starts off quite intriguingly as well, and this man that Cordelia meets in the supermarket, and he asks her to do something quite, well, to pretend to be his girlfriend because he doesn't want to, because he wants to basically show off in front of his ex-wife, and it basically starts a whole series of events which ultimately lead to her walking off from the beach. And I did like it. I'm still undecided whether I like the ending, and I think in a way it's the way the book had to end, but part of me wishes it had ended a bit differently and then I might have liked it more. But I enjoyed reading about how she built up a new life for herself and why she left. So yeah, I thought that was, I would recommend it. So look, I forgot my star ratings for these books. The Keeper of Lost Things, I actually gave 3.5 stars myself, so the book club scored it more. This I gave 4 stars. I'm checking my book journal here. So the next book I read was another charity shop find, and one I'd never heard of before, and it's called Furman by Sam Savage, who, yes, shares the same surname as me, but no relation. And basically it's about, this is the back of the blurb, Furman is a debonair soul trapped in a rat's body. That's it, okay. He lives in the basement of a ramshackle bookstore run by the shambolic Norman Shine, whereas the runt of his litter he chews on the books around him in order to survive. Thanks to his unusual diet, Furman develops the ability to read and a very unrat-like sense of his world and his place in it. So basically it's about a literary rat called Furman who is born in a bookstore. He is the runt of the litter. He doesn't have much to eat because his brothers and sisters shove him out of the way, and he starts nibbling on their bedding, which is pages torn from books in the bookstore, and he develops this level of intelligence that the other rats don't have. So I was really intrigued. I mean, his books and talking rats, literary rats, kind of caught my attention. It also has a quote from Philip Pullman on the back, which always helps. And I have to say that as a child, when we read Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim at school, I really loved that book, again, talking rats. So I was intrigued. It took me a little bit longer than I thought it would, perhaps, to kind of get into this story. Just the way it's, the writing style, and again, it's one that I sort of read quite slowly because I sort of almost thought halfway through, do I want to persevere with it? I could have taken it or left it, but I persevered and I'm glad I did. I mean, it was an enjoyable story. I don't think I would rave about it, but I did like it. Basically the bookstore it's in a part of town, I can't remember what town, what place in a city in America that it's in, but it's basically in an area that's been under development, so they're knocking down all the buildings and the bookstore doesn't have very many days left in business, basically. And it's about Furman, how he kind of strikes up a friendship with an older man who's also an author who lives nearby. So yeah, by the time it ended, I was kind of sorry to see Furman go, but it took me a while to get into it. So I think I gave this book 3 stars. So it's sort of middle of the road. Okay, the next book I read was one, I don't read very many autobiographies. I was basically in the supermarket, the cover caught my eye, I think she's funny, and I just thought, do you know what, I feel like reading some real life stuff for a while. So it is How to Be Champion by Sarah Millican. If you're in the UK, I don't know how famous she is outside the UK, possibly more than I think. But yeah, she's a comedian, and this is her autobiography. So I really like this, and actually I think this is probably my book of the month, which is a bit of a surprise to me, but it's the book that I read the quickest during the month, so it's the one that engaged me the most, it's the one that really hooked me. I think if I was picking a fiction book of the month, it would be this one, The Ladder of Years, but I think overall out of the 5 or the 5.5 books that I read, I would pick this one because, you know, it's interesting to learn about people's lives, about how really successful people, because she is a very, very, very successful comedian now. It's really interesting to learn how they started out and to read about their journey, and, you know, everybody thinks that you just make it overnight, which is never the case, well, very rarely the case. And it's just, you know, I've learned a lot about her, about how you become a comedian, and many jobs that she juggled throughout that time. There's pictures in it as well, which is quite nice, always helps. And yeah, it's funny as well because obviously she's a comedian, so there are funny. It's funny. Her writing style is funny. She tells jokes and things, and I really enjoyed it. It also has some, as somebody that works for themselves, and we're both sort of businesswomen, I guess. It's interesting from that point of view for me to kind of see how she built her brand, her business, and the sort of motivational tips that she would give you as well. And it's quite funny as well that at the end of every chapter, she has little boxes at the end of most chapters which tells you how to be champion, and obviously that's an expression better said in her Geordie accent, but that's something that she says quite a lot. So the final book I read, which I literally finished on the 30th of June, is another charity shop find, and it's a German, Austrian, Robert Seth, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Sethaler. Okay, no idea how to pronounce his name, but it's called A Whole Life. And you can read the author's name yourself. He's from Vienna, and it was translated by Charlotte Collins. So I've read a few books in translation over the past couple of years, and I really like, I really like to do that because it's just another, you can miss out on so much by just reading books that are just only written in English, so it's really nice to read books in translation. So A Whole Life, it's very short, but it probably took me longer than I thought it would. I could have read this in a day, let's be honest, but it took me a bit longer than that because maybe I wasn't in the mood for it, but I didn't love it. I'm seeing how many stars did I give it. I haven't actually scored it. I'd probably give it 3 stars. So I'll read you the blurb. Andreas Egger knows every path and peak of his mountain valley, the source of his sustenance, his livelihood, his home. Set in the mid-20th century and told with beauty and tenderness, his story is one of man's relationship with an ancient landscape, of the value of solitude, the arrival of the modern world, and above all, of the moments, great and small, that make us who we are. So the blurb really appealed to me. I'm not sure, I think I was expecting something a little bit different. I mean, yes, it does follow Andreas Egger's life. He is a bit of a, I don't want to say recluse, I mean he obviously interacts with people, but he kind of keeps himself to himself. Something quite tragic happens to him when he's a young man. He doesn't have a great experience, great upbringing, but he's kind of orphaned early on and left with a relative who's not the nicest to him. But yeah, it's a strange little book. I mean, I think I would recommend it, but I didn't love it. It didn't really hook me. I kind of felt a bit, I don't want to say almost bored with it, which is, I usually love these sort of books, and the blurb really appealed to me, something about the landscape, and there are elements of it that I liked. But maybe it's just Andreas. I didn't totally connect with him as much as I thought I would. But yeah, it was a short book, and I'm glad I read it, but it just wasn't perhaps what I was expecting. So those are the books that I read in June. I might hopefully read some more than 5.5 books in July, but we shall see. I don't set myself a limit, I just take it as it comes, and if I read fast it's because the books are really good, and if I read slowly then the books possibly aren't so good. But yeah, let me know if you're reading anything of which you're really loving at the moment. The next book for our Giants Causeway book club is actually this year's Pulitzer Prize winner book. I don't have it with me, it's downstairs, but it's called Less by Andrew Greer, and it sounds really good. It's about a novelist who is just turning 50. He's invited to his ex-boyfriend's wedding, he doesn't want to go, and so he starts accepting all these half-baked literary event invitations around the world, and it's meant to be really funny, and I don't think you can go wrong with a Pulitzer Prize winner, I hope. So that's it for June. Let me know what you're reading, as I say, and I will see you next month, if not before. Thanks for watching. Bye.